Hey, everybody. How's it going? So they, not you, Erica. Not you.
But you asked me.
I asked them. Okay, fine. You too. How are you doing, Erica?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing lovely.
People don't ask you how you're doing. You always ask people how
I know it's unfair. Hey, everybody. How's it going? So, a lot of you have been linking me to this particular article about Congress potentially mandating anti-drunk driving technology for vehicles. This is from Engadget. It says over here it's expected to be signed by the president soon about an infrastructure bill. As part of the legislation, car makers will have to include technology to detect and stop drunk drivers by as early as 2026. The bill requires something that will, quote, passively monitor the performance of a driver or of a motor vehicle to accurately identify whether the driver may be impaired. It sounds similar to infrared camera solutions already used today by GM, Nissan, and others. It goes without saying we need something more advanced than breathalyzers that are already used as a punishment for convicted drunk drivers. Now, the idea here is for the car to have some way to detect whether or not you are intoxicated. And it sounds like a good thing. It sounds like what they're doing is they see that a lot of people die from drunk driving. With all the technology we have nowadays, surely there's a way to just keep you from driving the car if you are drunk. On its face, sounds like a decent intentioned idea. I enjoyed reading comments on this article that demonstrate that there are people out there who are like-minded when they say, quote, I'm sure there are absolutely no privacy, cost, right to repair, or government overreach concerns with this measure at all. Thanks for keeping the proles fully informed on the latest from the Ministry of Truth. I'm absolutely opposed to people driving under the influence, but why do we have to spend millions passing a law that is ultimately the responsibility of the citizenry? And, you have a lot of people wondering how this could be potentially misused. One of my favorite comments is, I had some engine work done on my new 2021 Volkswagen. The mechanic let me know that I must be having a fun time driving because he saw how fast I was driving, what gear I shifted into, and at what time, and which roads I took to get there. Of course, when I excitedly asked for the telemetry, I was told it's property of Volkswagen and can't view those analytics. So the way you drive your car, the information that the device that you paid for is producing is property of the company that made the car. It's not property of you. So when you heard all of that talk about safety and security and how people could break into telemetry and it's not secure, you know what I think is not secure? My car logging information on me that other people can see and I cannot. But besides all of that stuff, I really think that this may have come from a well-intentioned place, but there are just many things to go over here as to why I am not particularly for it. We have more and more technology going into a car nowadays that it just gives the automaker or the government more ability to screw with your ability to utilize your vehicle. Whether it is a GPS that is built into the car, you can see where someone is all the time, the ability to remote start and stop. Tesla has this little camera that's right above the mirror that could be watching you. You have GM where they have Super Cruise and they want to tell if your eyes are on the road, even if your hands are not on the steering wheel. How does it do that? By seeing where your eyes are all the time. How's it going to do that? Probably with a camera inside of the car that is try and tell how you are driving, whether or not you are drunk, that are then going to disable your vehicle. And then it does, again, beg the question of how this could potentially go wrong. Many people in America were excited about the Patriot Act. They were really excited about preventing another 9/11. What did we get 20 years later? We have warrantless wiretapping, infinite data storage, all of this crap where you really have given up a lot of your right to privacy, a lot of your Fourth Amendment rights, and we really haven't made much progress on getting that stuff back. In spite of the fact that your average ordinary person thinks it's gone too far, once you put it in place, it's really, really hard to roll this stuff back. When it comes to privacy, I think that there are a lot of regrets over what we've given up over the past 20 years. Yeah, again, it's like inertia, like what Eli the computer guy says. Once you kind of got something going, it is really hard to stop it or to go back to the way things were once you get used to it. We've already normalized the idea that my car knows where I am, my car collects data on how I drive, that my mechanic can see and I cannot, and there's a camera in my car staring at me at all times. Do we really want to go that extra step of it disabling the car if a sensor thinks there's something wrong? Further, having so many sensors in the car that if the sensor is advanced enough to detect whether or not I am under the presence of alcohol, is it advanced enough to do other types of tracking and data collection? Is this then open to hacking? Because you hear this all the time, that this vehicle data, all this data that your car collects on you is very insecure to make that available to an independent repair shop. How about the car not collect data on me to begin with? How about I have some control over my car that I paid $25,000 for? If you pay $25,000 for a vehicle, I believe that A, you should have the ability to turn off tracking. B, if you can't, at the very least, you should be able to see the data that your vehicle is collecting on you and not just Volkswagen. Will this actually even work? And further, what will happen when these sensors that are designed to detect what's going on to keep people safe are put into place in manners that don't actually make sense? So even with that, there's just so many different ways to come at this from. So I don't really like the fact that we're even discussing this, but I have to because it is relevant and in the news now. Apple is talking about the possibility of making a car. That scares the shit out of me. It does, because I will share the road with this eventually. But Apple is talking about making a car. Now, Apple has MacBooks, and these MacBooks have sensors. And the way that the MacBook responds to what it gets from the sensors is not always particularly the most rational. And I go over that in many of these videos on this playlist, MacBook Logic Board Sensor Issue, which you can find on my channel. I've got only 7 videos in this playlist, but I'm sure there's many more of me going over sensors. In a MacBook, when a sensor fails, it won't just report nothing. It reports that it's reading minus 124 Celsius or negative 124 Celsius. The way the computer responds to believing that it is negative 124 Celsius is ramping the fans up to 6,000 RPM, because if there's anything an Apple computer thinks it needs when it's minus 124 Celsius, it's more cold air. Rather than it just reporting something different, it makes the computer completely unusable. But just interesting, the reaction there. It thinks it is negative 124 Celsius. The way it reacts is by turning the fans on higher. Now, let's just talk about how something like, let's say, Tesla with their autopilot reacts to data it gets from its sensors. A lot of people will say that they don't believe somebody should be utilizing autopilot if they're not paying attention to the road. I agree. You probably shouldn't be utilizing a car if you're not paying attention to the road. And many people have said the car has a lot of sensors, so let's see if we can stop that. Sensible, fine. Sounds like common sense legislation there. How does Tesla actually implement this? Tesla has in their Model 3, if you get the base model, there's 2 things that most people think of when they consider autopilot. You have adaptive cruise control. You pull the stalk down once, and the car is able to tell how far you are from the cars in front of it. So if you set it to 60 miles an hour, it's not just going to go 60 miles an hour straight into the car in front of you. It will automatically slow down, speed up, slow down, and speed up, so it maintains a safe following distance from the car in front of you. The second feature, when you pull the stalk down twice, is something called auto steer. Auto steer is what's going to keep you in your lane, so the car doesn't slowly drift out of its lane. It can tell the road is winding, the road is straight. It keeps you in your lane. Here's how Tesla's system works. If it detects that you are not paying attention to the road because it doesn't feel that you're pulling on the steering wheel, what it does is it will eventually turn off auto steer. You'll get a couple of beeps and noises, but once it turns off auto steer, it will no longer keep you in your lane. You're not paying attention to the road. The car responds by not keeping you in your lane. But adaptive cruise control stays on. I shit you not. The car will continue going 80 miles an hour, but it will no longer keep you in your lane. Your punishment for the fact that you are not paying attention to the road, or my punishment as the person driving next to you, is that my car gets to get smashed into at 80 miles an hour if you don't pick up in time. So if you fall asleep while you're driving with autopilot on, rather than do what I think it should do, which is actually keep you in your lane, what it does is it goes out of its way to turn off the thing that will keep you in the lane, but keep the gas pedal going so that you go 80 miles an hour into a guardrail or another car or, God forbid, a pedestrian or who the hell knows. Well-intentioned, horribly, horribly coded. What happens when these sensors fail in a manner like it does in a MacBook? If the sensor fails, does it default to the computer doesn't run at all? If the sensor to tell if you're drunk or not fails, does it default to assuming you're drunk and not allowing you to use your car? There's so many questions about this. How much redundancy is built into these sensors? If you have more sensors, if one of them fails, is it like a MacBook where you only need one of these sensors to fail for the fans to go up to 6,000 RPM and for it to be clocked down to a point where it takes 10 minutes to load the operating system even with an SSD? We could come at this from a cost standpoint. Is this going to increase the cost of cars going forward? You may notice that many of the cars that have a lot of these advanced features tend to be cars that cost considerably more money than the cars that do not have a lot of these advanced monitoring features. Is this going to even be effective? If I am the type of guy that is going to drive drunk, maybe I'll buy a used car. There are many cars you can purchase right now that were produced between 1990 and 2010 that just have none of the stuff in them at all. And those cars are going to be repairable likely for a long time into the future. It's going to be a really long time before you never see a car from 2010 on the road ever again, because that's just way too old. Yeah, you're probably not going to see a lot of Ford Model Ts on the road, but for the next 20 or 30 years, you're probably going to see cars made from 2000 to 2015 or so on the road. I don't think that is a stretch. If you're the type of person to drive drunk, maybe you're the type of person that'll purchase a used car. Is this even going to be something that decreases the amount of drunk driving accidents? Further, is it really a good idea to allow the government as well as the vehicle manufacturer to collect this degree of data on you and then log it and then send it to them? Will you actually have access to this data? If the vehicle gets it wrong and says you're drunk when you're not drunk, does the manufacturer of the vehicle now have the ability to report you for drunk driving? Will this be seen as foolproof, where you could actually be accused of drunk driving in the past, even when you were not drunk driving because the sensor is wrong? There are so many things wrong with this, other than just the basic idea that it's a good idea that your car keep you from drunk driving. There are so many ways for this to go wrong. There are so many ways that our current systems that are in place to try and, quote, keep you safe within your vehicle are actually coded in a manner, or again, in my opinion, make you less safe. If you fall asleep in your car, I hope to God that your Tesla keeps auto steer on so that you do not crash into my car in my lane. I hope it just continues going until you get to traffic and you come to a stop, or at some point, figures out a way to change lanes and take you onto the side of the road and put the hazards on. The idea that it will keep going but turn auto steer off, who decides this stuff, is beyond me. Then you also have the fact of it keeping people from adopting newer vehicles. So a lot of people talk about climate change and how we need to adopt newer electric vehicles that have less emissions. We already have giant culture wars going on when it comes to electric vehicles for two separate reasons. The first is the whole rolling coal thing, because people believe that they are being personally attacked when they see Greta Thunberg and people like that go, how dare you? That has created this culture war thing where if somebody's driving a Prius and the other dude's driving an F-350 diesel, that they will roll coal on them. Again, like literally just saying, I'm going to make the environment shittier just so that I can make a point on how much I dislike you. We already have that going on. Then you're going to combine that with the fact that electric cars are less repairable than older vehicles. This is the saddest part for me. This is the part that is just disgusting for me, because as someone who enjoys messing with his Bafang motor and Cyclone motors and phase runners and ASI motor controllers and everything else, I've opened up enough of these, even though I am not a mechanic by any stretch of the imagination, to have the basic understanding to know that an electric motor is far more simple than an internal combustion engine vehicle. There's far less parts that you have to worry about. There's far less general maintenance that you need to do. These are simpler systems that should be easier to fix. The only reason that they are not easier to fix is because electric cars started to become popular during a time when we valued freedom less. Same thing with smartphones. Like with your computer, you can change the BIOS, bootloader, all that stuff. You can install apps from whoever you want. Why? Because desktop computers came out around late 70s, 80s, 90s, back when we actually valued freedom. Smartphones started to get really popular in the late 2000s as we were on the downswing of freedom. You can't unlock your bootloader on many devices. You can't install the operating system that you want. On some of them, they may not even allow you to install applications that you want to install if you buy them from another store without jailbreaking your device. Electric cars have started to become popular in the late 2000s. So we're kind of rewriting the rules that we used to have back in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, and 50s when automobiles started to become massively popular. There's no reason that electric cars should be more difficult to fix. What makes them more difficult to fix is the complete inability to get access to any of what you need to do your job. And then when you finally do get access to all of that, or if you are able to somehow go over all the hurdles and fix it yourself, now you have to deal with the manufacturer saying, okay, you cannot charge the car when traveling if you do that. So even if you did the repair and did a perfect job, we're going to keep you from being able to utilize the car in a manner that makes it viable for a cross-country road trip. So what you're going to do is you're going to add this stuff in. Now you're giving people more reasons to not utilize cars that should be easier to maintain and that are better for the environment. The car made in 1990 is not going to track me. The car in 2021 or 2026 is going to watch me all the time. And if it thinks I'm drunk, it will disable me from driving it, even if I am not drunk. And then when you say, well, it's just going to see how good a driver you are. And one of the interesting things about the Tesla safety score thing, if you're inside New York City, it immediately assumes you're a shittier driver because it says you have a, quote, unsafe following distance. Now, if you've ever been in Manhattan traffic before, you know that there is constantly people trying to sneak in. And if you have even this much space available, somebody will smash into your car in order to try and get into that little space in the lane. So it is natural when driving in Brooklyn or Manhattan to have a short following distance. You do not have a 2 or a 4 car following distance when you have a tiny city, a small island with 2 or 3 million people on it. That's not how it works. Their app is so dumb, it can't tell the difference between you driving through the plains of Wyoming versus Midtown Manhattan. It will automatically lower your safety score if it sees you're driving through Manhattan. It will give you these little things that say unsafe following distance, unsafe following distance, unsafe following distance, because the system is too stupid to tell that you are not driving on a highway around the White Mountains in New Hampshire, but rather you're driving in Manhattan. I could give examples until I'm blue in the face of the many reasons that this is a bad idea. But at the end of the day, I really think it comes down to the fact that we have slowly but surely allowed ourselves to be tracked in more ways. And I'm very curious at what point people are just going to say, fuck you. No. Listen, the car knows where I am. The car can be remotely stopped or started. The car can look at me via the camera that's in it. And now you're going to say that in addition to all of that, not being able to fix my car the way I could before because you're not going to make parts available for electrics the same way you did for internal combustion engine cars, you're also going to have technology in it that tries to detect how I'm driving and then disable my ability to drive the car using what is, in my opinion, questionable at best sensor technology. At some point, I think you're going to see people just opt out of purchasing newer vehicles entirely. They are going to say, screw this, and there will be a countercultural revolution of people buying used, older cars, which, again, I think is sad. Again, I like the idea of green energy. I like electric motors. I think they are cool. And if you think that electric cars suck or electric motors suck because of this, culture war shit where they're being pushed by people that you dislike, or if you dislike them because you think they're inherently less fixable, you got to come by sometime and just play with a Bafang or a Cyclone motor controller where you can change the PID loop of it. You can change the proportional gain, integral gain, see how you can make it go smooth, or you can make the chain whip and go for an instant start. It is so much fun. Electric motors are so much fun. In addition to having a lot less to maintain, they are just really, really cool. I think it's really sad and disgusting how everything is coming together to create this perfect storm to where there will be a counterculture backlash against newer, more modern electric vehicles. In an ideal world, you would have less emissions, less maintenance, and at the end of the day, once lithium-ion battery technology is either replaced with something better or just becomes cheaper, you actually have a cheaper vehicle. Instead, you get more expensive repairs that you can't do yourself, a car that's constantly watching you, and at some point may actually decide if you're allowed to drive your own vehicle. I think you're going to see a lot of people opt out of it altogether, and I think that needs to be considered when you are considering this legislation. And I don't think most politicians think of this when they come up with policies. How are these policies going to potentially inflame counterculture movements that will get the exact opposite accomplished that we want to have accomplished? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.